Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this webinar. We are just going to give everyone a moment to get in and get settled, and just to let everyone know that we are going to record the session as well, because we have lots of people that have registered and signed up, but specifically would like to try and get the recording. So we shouldn't really be capturing anyone's screen anyway. We're mostly going to be recording and capturing the presentation slides and myself and Lisa. But if anyone's conscious of that, please feel free to just keep your video off as well. I'm joined by my lovely colleague Alison as well, who's going to provide us with some tech support this afternoon. So helping admit people, and Alison might post some things in the chat and help with some of the slides as well. So please get comfortable, settle in, make sure you've got a cup of tea or a snack. It's that time of the afternoon, I reckon. And we'll just start in just a moment. Okay. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining this webinar, Building Help-Seeking Cultures for Children and Young People in Schools, with myself, Chris Higgins, and with the wonderful Lisa Parsons from Kids Helpline at School. We'll introduce ourselves a bit more thoroughly in a moment, but before we do that, I would like to acknowledge all the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all joining from today. This beautiful artwork is called Children of the Barwon Fishway, by a wonderful artist called Belinda Oni from the Murawari people. And we would like to acknowledge that these are lands that have been the continuous living culture for over 3,000 generations of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for over 60,000 years, and have been places of stories, of connection, and they are unceded lands. And particularly here at MacKillop, and with the work that we do with children, young people, and adults in vulnerable communities across the country, we would particularly acknowledge the harms that have been caused to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people over the years, and their resilience, and always working towards reconciliation, and that we stand in solidarity now and always with all of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and we pay respects to all of our elders, past and present, and we pay respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today, currently on the lands of the Wurundjeri of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. So thank you for joining us for this webinar, Building Help-Seeking Cultures for Children and Young People in Schools. Why we're doing this is because we know that help seeking is a critical protective factor for our children and our young people. However, what the research consistently shows us is, and identifies, is that many students actually don't seek help in a school setting. And there's potentially a range of reasons why that might happen. For example, there might be a stigma associated with it, or there might be a fear of consequences. There might be their own histories or their own personal circumstances, and a range of barriers. So what can we do within schools culturally? So how can we create an entire school culture that promotes help seeking? But also, what can we do as individual practitioners to promote help seeking? And what can we actually set up and put in place that is really practical, and some really practical strategies and tools to support help seeking from our children and young people in schools? How can we better do that to better protect our children and young people? So I'll talk from a lens of the kind of whole school and the whole school bigger picture and culture, and I'll explain why I'm going to talk from that lens shortly. And Lisa will talk more from that individual help seeking and those practical strategies and what we can do on the ground in our schools. I am Chris Higgins. I'm the director of the MacKillop Institute, and my background is all in education and working with children and young people. Started my career career as a high school teacher, humanities high school teacher for a long time, before I then moved into the children's charities and not-for-profit space, and have worked across 23 Asia Pacific countries on student exchange programs and staff exchange programs, and then eventually made my way to MacKillop Institute, where we do lots of work on child safety, child safeguarding, and whole school cultures of safety. I'm also joined by the wonderful Lisa Parsons from Kids Helpline at Schools. Lisa Parsons is a youth mental health and wellbeing advocate and is a very experienced educator. She has a strong background in school engagement and community support, and she currently works as the school engagement partner with Kids Helpline at School. She supports a range of schools to strengthen student well-being, specifically through really evidence-informed practices and preventative approaches. Lisa brings extensive experience as a primary school teacher alongside additional qualifications in TESOL, and is deeply committed to creating safe, inclusive, and supportive environments for children and young people. Lisa, I know you're going to say a little bit more about Kids Helpline at School, but is there anything you want to add there about yourself or about Kids Helpline at School before we move any further along?
Oh, first of all, Chris, thank you for that amazing introduction. And I just wanted to say thank you to you and the MacKillop Institute for having me as part of this webinar today. Help seeking, particularly in schools and for young people, is something that I'm really passionate about and is what brought me to work in this role in the first place. So it's a real honour to be here talking about something I'm so passionate about. And as part of my role, I do a lot of engagement with schools, talking about, the issues that their young people are facing and what some barriers to help seeking are that they're seeing. So I'll share some of those insights today. And I work closely alongside our Kids Helpline team. So I hear a lot about, what we're hearing and seeing come through Kids Helpline, and have the ability to share that with educators and schools, and keep everyone informed and up to date about, some of the challenges our young people are facing, and what we can all do together as a team to work towards supporting positive mental health and bright and happy futures for all of our young people. So yeah, thanks very much for having me.
And Lisa, I'm going to put you on the spot with another question, which we didn't talk about,
Sure.
but your logo, Kids Helpline at School, it also says, powered by your town. For those of us out there listening, watching, who don't know what your town is, what's your town?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So yeah, Your Town's a not-for-profit organisation that provides a lot of support to families and young people in a range of different services. So we provide assistance with employment, domestic violence, return to work support, and of course Kids Helpline and Kids Helpline at School. So you may have heard of Your Town Prize Homes and raffles. So they raise money towards supporting Kids Helpline getting more counsellors on the floor. And Kids Helpline at School is also lucky to be sponsored by Bupa, who help us run our education program for free as well. So yeah, Your Town is the umbrella that sits at the top of many services that come underneath it.
I've still never won one of those Gold Coast homes. Those lovely, yeah. It's
There's
every
still
year they do
time.
it. Yeah, there's every
There's
year
still
they do a
hope.
big. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I know you'll talk a little bit more about the work of your town and Kids Helpline and Kids Helpline at Schools shortly. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I'll start us off with some of that bigger school cultural piece, and maybe to explain a little bit more about the MacKillop Institute, and just very, very briefly, a little bit like your town and Kids Helpline is, your town's that bigger overarching not-for-profit that has a range of services supporting children, young people, and families. And then, one of those services delivered is Kids Helpline, and another one is Kids Helpline at School, and another one is Parent Line as well, right, Lisa? There's Parent Line as well
Yes,
for
that's
your town.
correct. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. My Circle as well is another service that we have. Quibble. Yeah, there's quite a few.
quite a
Yeah.
few. That's it. And people don't realize how big some of these things can be.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
right.
Well, and we're a little bit similar. So for us here at McKillop, for anyone who's not familiar with us, we're a little bit similar. We have these big kind of umbrella organization and then broken down into some smaller places. And so where I work in the McKillop Institute, we are just one tiny part of McKillop Family Services. And McKillop Family Services, like your town, is this much bigger not-for-profit and community services organization where most of our work is actually with really vulnerable children and families. And so we support a lot of children and young people who are involved in child protection or the youth justice system. We also support a lot of children and young people who, for a range of reasons, things have happened to them, and really traumatic and complex histories and circumstances. And for many of those children and young people, they might disengage from mainstream education. And so we also have a range of schools. We have 5 schools, McKillop Education, where we support young people who have disengaged from mainstream schooling. And then we also have a whole range of education engagement outreach programs as well. And some similar spaces, we also work in some family and domestic violence spaces, some homelessness, and some NDIS work as well. And across all of that work, we've learned a few things about organizational culture. We've learned a few things about school culture and whole school and whole organizational cultures, child safety and safeguarding and well-being as well. And so there's lots of similarities and lots of alignment between ourselves and your town. And I keep looking over here. I'm realizing I'm looking over here because Lisa's actually up on my screen over here. So sorry that I'm looking away from the screen because I'm actually trying to look and smile at Lisa at the same time. So lots of similarities between our organizations, and really why we're doing this webinar today is just to try and share some little bits of anything that we can that might support you, in your practice for those who are here listening today. And I'm really lucky that the Institute is just an extension of what we do at McKillop Family Services, where we're really just taking out some of what we do internally and trying to share it out with other organizations and other schools. And most of what we do is that trauma-informed practice and big cultural stuff. So I'll start us off today with my little section on the whole school culture that promotes help seeking, and then we'll move to Lisa for the more kind of hands-on and practical and individual strategies. So without further ado, a little prompt, a little reflection question for everyone to think of, first of all. And I was going to put it in as a poll, so I'm highlighting my lack of tech skills right now. I was going to put it in as a poll, but then I realized setting it up like this webinar that I didn't actually set it up correctly, and I couldn't actually put it as a poll. So we're going to do it as a reflective question instead, and I just want everyone to have a little think for a second. But looking at the data, looking at what we know from the research, and looking at even some of the data that we collect here at McKillop, who do we think children in our schools often go to first if they feel unsafe or if they feel like they need help? Just have a little think about that question for me for a moment. Do we think it is normally a teacher? Is it normally another staff member, maybe an allied health or an administrative or, maintenance person? Is it a friend? Or is it maybe even, their parent or carer who might be involved in the school as well? Lisa, what's your guess? What do you think we find out?
Myself. Yeah, it's actually really interesting that you asked this question because we've just done a survey with our youth network on help seeking in schools and their experience. And the feedback that we got from them was if it was a learning issue, they're definitely more likely to go to a teacher if it's something they're feeling stressed or having wellbeing issues related to. But if it's a specific wellbeing, mental health issue or something along those lines, and they tend to seek help first either from a peer or they tend to go to like a wellbeing staff member or another adult who's sort of identified as being there to support in the wellbeing space.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Lisa. And that's great that you've even captured that recent data. And I can see some people are posting in the chat as well, which I love. So thank you so much for everyone that's posting in the chat. And I'm also realizing that I didn't mention we will give time at the end for questions as well. So if people have questions, you are more than welcome to hold them till the end and then pop them in the chat. And Lisa and I will take turns to answer those questions. But yeah, I think Lisa has summarized it beautifully. For our children and young people, they can often, depending on what the nature of the challenge is and what they're seeking help with, it can often actually be that they default to a friend or a peer first, especially if it is something to do with personal circumstances, with friendship groups, with maybe feeling unsafe. And, when I talk about unsafe from, our lens of the work that we're doing, that can cover a whole range of things. But a lot of the work we do is also around child safeguarding. And what we know from that is that a friend is actually the most common one that our children and young people go to if they don't feel safe within a relationship or within like potentially an unhealthy or unsafe relationship. They're actually going to go to their friends for help more than they are a teacher or a trusted adult in the school. And the other most likely one, if they feel unsafe in that kind of scenario, is actually usually the mum. So, if there is a mum in their life, that's the other most common one. And what we do with some of our work in schools is we do ask a couple of these questions to the young people that we're working with. And here's just a snapshot of some of that data that we found. So we have asked, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of young people, is there a teacher in your school that you'd feel safe to talk to if you or a friend felt unsafe? And what's come out, which is really, really interesting, and this is actually a lot better than I probably expected it to be, is that most of our young people, 2/3 of our young people have said yes. There is a teacher or a staff member in our school who I would feel safe to talk to. But the downside of that is there's also 40%. There's also one in three who is saying that actually they don't. And if we think about that data a little bit more, although we're saying 60% and we're saying 2 in 3 feel that there is a staff member or teacher in the school that they feel safe to, it might only be one. It might only be one. And what does that mean for us as professionals and staff members in that space? We've also asked them why. We also asked them what some of the barriers are and what our children and young people have said. And specifically when we're thinking about something that might be in relationships, so not learning related, as Lisa highlighted, and I think that's an important caveat here, is when it's not learning related, some of the reasons our children and young people said that they wouldn't talk to an adult in a school was because they don't want other people to know, and they're worried if they tell an adult that other people will find out. They don't want other people to get into trouble. They might think that it's a secret and that they shouldn't tell people. They might feel embarrassed by what the situation actually is. They don't want to get into trouble because they might think that they've done something wrong. And not the most common one, but another reason is that they're worried that the teachers or the staff will judge them and not understand the situation. That a lot of that is about the culture of the school as well as the individual relationships that we have with our children and young people. But we know that there's lots of things that can have an impact on that. And we know that how we create a safe space for everyone within a school needs to consider a whole range of factors. For each individual child and young person that are in our schools, we know that how they perceive a relationship, how they perceive safety in the relationships around them can be influenced by things like their culture, their religion, their past experiences, and their past experiences with other adults or with other children and young people can really influence that, their own personal beliefs, and also society and media. And I think we know more now more than ever the impact that things like social media and the digital world can have on our perceptions of safety. So what do we know? And what we know is, and from all the psychology and from all the childhood development studies, what we do know is that all children and young people experience their world as an environment of relationships. And that those relationships they have, whether it be with the adults around them, the other children, the other young people, their families, their wider communities, every single one of those relationships will affect their development. But how does it affect their development? And that is the big question here is, one of the key things we say here at McKillop is it's not what's wrong with you. And I think that was a common phrase I certainly heard when I was a kid, especially when I was acting out, is, what's wrong with you? It's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened. What's happened? And so if we think about the relationships and how a child or young person might see help seeking, well, what's happened that they might not seek help? Has something happened in their past experiences, in their belief system, in society and media around them that has impacted how they see those relationships? And what we also know from our work here at McKillop is that many, many, many things can impact on how that is all influenced. And we know that there's actually a couple of things, not just the relationships and the trusted relationships, but there's also the other external supports and also the internal working skills as well. So trauma trauma can influence our young people and how they trust those around them. We know that how they might be feeling in that point in time, and if they are stressed, can impact how they are feeling in that moment. And we know that it's about how their internal skills are working at that point in time, but also how the external things are working at that time. What we know is that if a child or young person has really strong, effective internal skills to seek help, that is a huge, huge, huge benefit. If they have those skills and they have external support, so they have trusted adults around them, they have adults around them who can promote help seeking, they're in a culture that promotes help seeking, then it's a win-win. What happens when our child or young person doesn't have those internal skills? If they have suffered from extreme trauma or complex situations, if they in that moment are suffering from extreme stress and they are dysregulated because something has happened, if they don't have those internal skills to seek help in that moment or to seek help in any given moment, what do? They have to rely on the external supports. They have to rely on the trusted relationships around them. So, are the adults around them trusted, first of all? Do they have effective relationships to support that child and young person? And are there mechanisms and supports set up and really practical things like the things Lisa are going to talk about? Are they there? And are they effective to support that child or young person if they are lacking the internal skills at that point in time? And what if it's the other way around? What if they've got the internal skills, they are effective at trying to seek help, but there's no external supports and there's no trusted relationships? I could be a child or a young person who thinks that I am quite good at help seeking and knows how to seek help. But if I don't trust a single adult around me, if I'm in a school environment and I don't trust a single one of those adults, or there's maybe only one and that one is not there at that point in time when I might be needing some help, or the school environment itself is not set up in a way that allows me to be able to or promotes me to seek help, then we're going to end up in a very, very difficult situation. And what happens if we have neither? If we have children and young people that because of things that might have happened to them or because of how they are feeling in that moment in that time, they don't have the effective internal skills to seek help. And we're also in an environment that hasn't set us up to promote help seeking and have trusted relationships, then we're going to find ourselves in an even more difficult situation. So for us here and the work that we are doing at McKillop, that school environment and those trusted relationships, those supportive relationships are the fundamental basis of this. If we want to promote any kind of help seeking for our children and young people, we have to set up the entire environment. And the way to set up that entire environment is through really supportive, trusted relationships. Now, I know that probably sounds like it's from the office of the obvious, but how do we actually do that? How do we, as the adults in a school environment, how do we show our children and young people that they can trust us? How do we show them that we are a supportive adult, that we are in a supportive relationship? How do we do that between the adult and the child and the young person? How do we also model that as adults between each other within a school environment? And how do we also support that between our students as well? I know many of you, when you've probably done your lesson planning over the years and you're planning activities, you've probably thought, all right, is this a teacher to student? Is this a student to student activity? Is this a student to teacher activity? Same thing with our relationships. How are we building and showing that trust between teacher, teacher, adult, 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 student, and student, student? And there's some really easy things we can do around common goals and norms and collaborative relationships, but there's lots of other things that we can do too. And our kids pick up on this stuff. Our kids can sense when something is not right. If you are an adult that has a frustrated relationship with another adult in your school, kids can pick up on that. They see the signs. Are you an adult that's going to respond consistently in every situation to that child? Are you the adult in the school that they're not sure how you're going to respond to a situation? If something happens in that classroom, do they know that you're going to respond in a calm and collected manner, or is it potentially going to escalate? Trusted relationships is also about being consistent and having that consistency. So anyone who's familiar with MacKillop will be familiar with our relate model, which is essentially how we run our schools. And this is essentially four things to how we run our school. So all of our 5 campuses, every single staff member, regardless of their role, is very familiar with this. That ultimately the way we see it is that learning and well-being can only happen really, really well if we're doing 4 fundamental things within that school culture. The first one is we have to foster that sense of safety, value, and connection. If we don't have relationships where everyone feels safe, valued, and connected to each other, then there isn't room for growth and for well-being. Once we do that and we lay those foundations, what's really, really important is how we recognize and manage stress. If we think about it and we think about ourselves when we're usually not our best, when we're usually at some of our worst versions of ourselves, it is when we are stressed. And that applies to us as adults. And that applies to us when we are children, young people, adolescents, especially when you're an adolescent and you are going through all that identity seeking, finding belonging, connection, figuring out yourself, hormones as well. But again, if we are the adult in this situation, how do we recognize stress in ourselves? How do we manage stress in ourselves? Do we manage that to build a consistent, stable relationship with a child or young person? And do we help them manage theirs as well? And then how do we design the environment in a way that is structured, in a way that is consistent, in a way that responds consistently? And how do we continue to maintain that and sustain that, making sure that everyone is responsible for it? And I think there's 2 keywords in that last part is shared responsibility. How do we make sure that as part of our school culture, everyone knows that they need to be part of this, and it's not someone over there, and it's not the well-being officer, and it's not just the guidance officer, or it's the chaplain, it's every single one of us in the school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about relational trust and what do we mean by relational trust. And it is that trust within the relationship. And this is a big core part of what we need within our whole school culture. So when we have relational trust, it doesn't mean that we are friends. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to be liked. I've definitely had that thought when I was a younger teacher, but it means that we will always show up. It means that we will always be consistent. It means that even if we don't necessarily like what we're hearing, are we going to respond in the same consistent way to that child or young person? And are we creating a space to have the conversations? So if we're thinking about whether we have relational trust with someone else, think about someone who you think you have relational trust with, whether it be a partner, whether it be a friend, whether it would be a colleague. Do you feel like you can do these things here on the screen? Can you engage in a challenging conversation with them comfortably? Is it an environment where you feel open to discussing ideas and practice, for example? Is it somewhere where you can open up and acknowledge that you don't know things, that you can take a risk? Is it somewhere where you can share information? If you feel you have that with another colleague or with another adult, how do we do that with our children and young people? If we can't confidently say that with my children and young people around me, that I can engage in a challenging conversation with them, I can create a space for open discussion and transparent discussion, that it's okay for me to say I don't know, and it's okay for them to say I don't know, that it's okay for me to say I need support, or for them to say they need support. If we can't answer yes to those things, we don't have relational trust. And relational trust is the basis of any of that help seeking that needs to happen with our children and young people. We would say to do that, first of all, takes unconditional positive regard. Genuine, unconditional positive regard. And when we put that genuine in there, it means genuinely believing in the inherent value of every single child and young person in front of us, accepting every single child and young person in front of us and caring about them and showing them that care, making sure that they know that they are valued and worthy and accepted. And how do we do that? How do you individually as a practitioner make sure that that child knows that even if, let's say they've become dysregulated or something has happened and it's not been, the best outcome of what's happened, how do you still make sure that they know that you still care about them, that you still value them, that they are still worthy, they are still accepted? How do you do things like talk about the behavior separate from the individual and the value of the individual? And, I've certainly found myself in situations where a child or young person might have done something or a behavior that really wasn't great and has led to some pretty, uncomfortable outcomes. But I've still made sure that they know that I care about them in that situation. And then how do we build that secure relationship? How do we still show them the empathy, the understanding, the care, while still teaching really clear boundaries and expectations and being a little bit playful as well? There's a great model called the PACE model, if you haven't heard about it, that talks about the importance of still being playful when we are working with our children and young people. Again, if we think about maybe some of the people who we have really, really strong relationships with as adults, you might find there's a little bit of playfulness in there as well. Alison certainly knows that I'll always like to try and have a few jokes and some playfulness in the work context as well. And so how we would think about that translating in a kind of our McKillop schools context is really starting to come down into the self-regulation and the co-regulation, and how we self-regulate and how we co-regulate. And if you've been to anything McKillop, you'll have heard us talk about this before, because it's a really, really key important thing. And this is where it comes back to the consistency, the relational trust. It's all connected. Is what happens when things go wrong. When things aren't going well, if they're not going, the way that maybe we think they should, or there's behaviors that are maybe not the most helpful behaviors happening, what do we do in that situation? Are we the adult that stays calm under stress? When we are stressed, when the child or young person is stressed and becoming dysregulated, are we calm? If we are calm, we stop this cycle of dysregulation and escalation. Or if in like this scenario, if we have a child or young person that maybe needs some help in that moment, but they're getting really, really stressed, and we escalate, we raise our tone or our voice, we change our tone, we show body language or gestures which are a bit different, that's only going to intensify and escalate the situation. If we've even done that once for a child or young person, we're already breaking that relational trust, even once. If we do that once, that child or young person can easily start to unconsciously or consciously perceive that we're not consistent. They don't know how we're going to react in that situation, and then they won't have that relational trust, that consistency. So we need to be very, very careful how we respond in situations and how we co-regulate. So when something happens and maybe one of our children or young people become dysregulated, how do we respond? Do we respond with calmness, with care, with empathy? Do we maybe move a little bit closer? Do we have gestures and body language? Do we have a softened smile? Do we have open palms? Do we lower our kind of pace and tone and go gently? Or are we escalating? How can we bring that child back to a place of regulation? And do they know we will act in that way every single time? If it's only one child in your class or maybe outside your class and in the yard, if other children see you responding in that way every single time and they see every single staff member in the school responding in that way every time, then we're building relational trust. But if they see different staff members responding in different ways, or they see you responding in different ways at different times, what does that tell them? So I'm going to kind of finish up my little bit, and this is maybe all sounding a little bit nebulous at this point. It's like, yeah, Chris, that's great. That's great. Build trust, build relationships. Yep, fantastic. Trying to do that every single day. But how do we actually do that? And how do we actually do that from a whole school lens? And really what we talk about here at MacKillop, and it comes back to those four key things that I mentioned at the start about promoting safety, countering stress, building the positive relationships engagement, and then ensuring that it is a shared responsibility. The way we would see it is that there are four key things that we need to do as a school. And there's lots of individual practices within this that we can focus on, but ultimately, the school, all the staff in the school need to have structure, routine, consistency, and predictability. And it's those four key things. So when it comes to the adults and their behavior and their responses, are they consistent? When it comes to the norms and the expectations of the school, of the staff, of the children, of the young people, is it consistent? Does everyone expect the same thing? Does everyone respond in the same way? Are things predictable? Do we know how someone's going to respond in a situation? Do we know what's going to happen next? Can we safely imagine what's going to happen next? If the answer is no, it's not predictable. And something being unpredictable breaks trust and breaks safety. Is there set routines? Now, schools are probably the best place for routines. We know that, everyone's used to only being able to go to the toilet every 55 minutes or, after a block of 55 minutes. So that we know they are places of routines, but how are we doing those routines, not just as a school, but within our individual classes, between classes, as a whole school and not just the timetable? Do we have really consistent patterns that we can expect to see? And then structure. And you can tell that, there's lots of overlap and there's lots of crossover between these. But within structure, do our children and young people and our adults always know what to expect now, the next day, the next week, the next term? Is it really, really clear and consistent structure? So the kind of top of my wee bit here before we move into Lisa's far more interesting, far more concrete stuff rather than my big picture, yes, relationships, fantastic. Just kind of thinking about some of that and maybe just even reflecting on some of the things I'm saying about think about the good relationships you have as adults and how do we translate that to our children and our young people. Is there anything that even just in this very, very short little bit, is there anything that you're thinking a wee bit differently about now? Is there anything that you're feeling a wee bit differently about? And is there anything that you could maybe even do a wee bit differently? It doesn't have to be something major or huge. It could just be something small as well. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to hand over to Lisa. Now, Lisa's going to take a wee moment just to switch over the slides because it's so much easier when you control your own slides. So I'm just going to stop sharing and Lisa will take over sharing. And just as Lisa's doing that, just a reminder that, towards the end, we will give time for questions. So there will be time for Q&A. You are more than welcome when we get to the question section to say, Lisa, and specifically kind of put your question to Lisa, or to say Chris and specifically put it to me, or you're welcome to just put it open to the room and just put your question in the chat as well. And I think that just as I'm saying that, Lisa is probably almost ready.
Sorry, I'm just making a quick.
Swapping
my
over.
screens are not playing kind
It's not
with
playing
me.
ball.
There we go. We're good now?
I think we're seeing your desktop. This is the joy of
Okay.
live action.
Jeez, team.
And you'll probably seen from that little snippet of Lisa sharing screen, she's an excellent Canva user. I know there'll be many Canva fans here in the webinar as well. If you haven't been on Canva of late, there are so many amazing advances. Some of the things Canva can do now, very different to when I first started using Canva with kids about 15 years ago, and all you could basically do was make a poster. I remember those days.
My apologies. Thank you for bearing with me. It's going to go to here. Okay, let me try again. No. Gotta love technology.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we're all used to this now, though, aren't we?
All
Never
right,
works when you want it to.
It seems to want me to have it on this screen. So I'm just going to be turning my head a little bit. So
Sorry, I just realized I'm still doing that. I'm still looking over here at the other screen, and yeah.
all right. You're in action now.
There we go. You're in action now. There
All
you go.
right, wonderful. Um, so today I'm going to be building on what Chris has said about the importance of trust and how we build that trust through those really important connections and relationships. And I'm really going to come at it from a help-seeking perspective and really breaking down help-seeking as a process. Rather than a one-step thing, and looking what schools can do along each step of that help-seeking process to support young people and to build up that trust. Here at Kids Helpline at school and Kids Helpline, obviously help-seeking is really, really important to us and to spread the word to young people that help-seeking is something that's really important as a wellbeing strategy in itself and not just a response to crisis. And how can we build up, their confidence and their skills to reach out early and ask for help, because we know that early intervention help seeking leads to a much more positive outcome for young people in working through their challenges and problems and builds their confidence to deal with other challenges that might pop up along the way as they navigate the various stages of life. And also helps prevent, more complex sort of mental health illnesses and disorders along the way when we build up those early help-seeking skills. So hopefully there'll be a lot of takeaways along the way for you today. So to start thinking about help seeking, I just want you to think about a scenario to start off with, an everyday situation where you've got a young person who rocks up to school and they tune into their body and all of a sudden they notice that maybe they don't feel so good. So perhaps they've got a headache, a sore throat, bit of fatigue, stomach ache. And without that young person actually even realizing, they start to engage in a process that they've learned along the way. So first of all, they're going to try some strategies. So things we all do if we're maybe not feeling well. We might be going to take a drink of water, ask the teacher for some fresh air, maybe ask if we can sit out of learning for a little bit and have a rest, head to sick bay, maybe take a toilet break. We try some of those strategies and perhaps we're still not feeling so good. So it's time to seek some additional support. It's maybe time to tell someone. So they might share with a friend that they're not feeling well. They might let a teacher know. It might be another support staff member in the school environment. Following that, they might need some additional support on top of that. They might need to go home. We might need to engage support from mum and dad. They might need some medication or tender care at home, some rest and recovery. If they're still not feeling better, they might need to seek some specialist support. So they might need to see a GP. There might be a diagnosis or some treatment. And that illness or concern continues, it might be a referral to a specialist. So I want you to think about like all the steps that young person had to go through as a help-seeking process when they're not feeling well to do with their physical health. And now I want to present you with a different scenario, but this time it's not to do with their physical health, it's to do with their mental health. So this time a young person arrives at school and they tune into their body and they start to realize they're not feeling so good. They might not have any idea why they're not feeling so good. They might be feeling stressed about an upcoming exam. They might be feeling angry, worried. That's the first part of the process. Following that, they're going to try some strategies. So they might rely on some breathing. They might feel like they need some physical movement. They might ask the teacher if they can take a walk during a break time. They might take a walk with a friend. They might do some writing or some drawing. They might put some earbuds in, listen to some music if it's break time. They're going to find a strategy that usually works for them or might work for them. If that's still not working, they're still not feeling good, they've tried those strategies, they're going to seek some additional support. They're going to tell a friend. They might talk to a trusted adult. They might bring in a parent or carer if they feel comfortable talking to that person. And those trusted adults will do their best to be there for that person and to help them resolve that challenge or support them through that challenge the best that they can. But sometimes then we might still need to take an extra step. The same as the parent might need to call on the GP. Sometimes we might need to call on a school counsellor, a guidance officer. We might need to reach out to a support service like Kids Helpline. So this is two separate scenarios, but a very similar process that young people need to go through. And I think what we need to understand from a help-seeking perspective is learning this process for our mental health is just as important as that process we learn for our physical health. So all of those skills for our physical health of knowing what to do when we don't feel well, that's all been modeled to us. It's all been, we've been given lots of tips and strategies and ideas of what to do when we don't feel well physically. Our young people need the same support with what to do when they're not feeling well with their mental health. So help seeking is a skill we learn through guidance and practice and feeling safe. We can't just expect that our young people are going to know how to do this. So how do we support them at each of these stages? How do we support them to, first of all, tune into their body and notice, hey, I'm not feeling so good? How do we build that emotional awareness and give them the language and communication skills to be able to actually express and work out what they're actually feeling? How do we build that emotional intelligence? How do we help teach them the strategies? Oh, now my screen's frozen. It's so much fun today. Sorry, team.
It's coming back. You just need to go into,
Okay.
that's you. There you go.
Sorry, team. We've got a storm hitting here, so I don't know if that's having impact on our Wi-Fi here, but okay. So yeah, how do we teach them the strategies? to those self-help strategies that they can try themselves first. So how do we build up their resilience? How do we build up that wellbeing toolbox so they know what strategies might work for them in that moment when they're experiencing a challenge that they might need to call on those strategies to help work through? How do we help them know who can help and where they can go to get that help? That's really, really important. Who within that school environment can they go to, and who outside of that school environment can they go to? And how do we get them into that position where they feel safe to actually go to those people? So a lot of this links back to what Chris, you talked about with building up those internal skills. So especially that emotional awareness and knowing the strategies. Let's help give them confidence with those internal skills to get through to that next step where they can take action, and then when they have trust to speak up and do that. So it's really important, I think, as part of help seeking to understand that mental health is something that we all have. So Chris, I'm not sure about what you hear with your work with schools, but definitely some of the feedback that we get from schools is there's still a lot of stigma related to this word mental health, and even using the word mental health within a school environment. So here at Kids Helpline at school and through Kids Helpline, we're trying to work really hard to keep breaking that stigma down and to communicate this message that mental health is something that we all have. It doesn't mean that you're broken or that there's something wrong with you. We all are going to have ups and downs in our life. And based on our past experiences and those internal skills and things that we have, we're all going to navigate those ups and downs differently and require different supports. We're all different, and it's going to fluctuate over time, just like our physical health. And it's really important as part of that to see help seeking as one of those strategies as looking after our mental health. And that, those wellbeing tools are not just there for when things break. If you think about, a car that starts to not work properly, we'll pull the tools out and we'll start to tighten things and fix them up, add oil, do things to keep it running well before it completely breaks down and gets a lot harder to fix. And help seeking in relation to our mental health is exactly the same. So we want to pull out those skills early and use them, and try and prevent our young people from ending up in crisis, because it's a lot more difficult to break down, those more complex problems and situations once they reach that crisis point. So the power of help seeking, what does it do? Why is it so important? So it helps prevent things from getting worse. It's going to build resilience and coping skills. So as young people engage through that help-seeking process, they're going to engage in relationships where other people are going to give them ideas and suggestions of what they can do. They're going to get this confidence of like, hey, like I had this problem and I solved it and I got on top of it, and like I've got this. Like the next time a challenge comes along, it's like, hey, I've got through something before. I do this again. Like what worked for me last time, I'm going to try that again and see if it works for me this time. And if it doesn't work,
I think that storm's rolling through. Okay, it looks like we've lost Lisa for a second there. Lisa's up in Queensland, everyone. And I know that there is a fair bit of rain and storms, and they do have an impact on the Wi-Fi. For anyone that has ever lived through the storms in Queensland, I know I definitely have before as well. Hopefully, get Lisa back in a second. Please bear with us. While we do, and while we're waiting for Lisa, if anyone has any questions now, please feel free to pop them in the chat now. Very happy to try and field those. I'm very happy to try and field them and take them. But yeah, hopefully we get Lisa back in a second. Oh, I think we've lost Lisa completely. Oh no. Sorry about that, everyone. That's definitely not a planned part of the session. Yeah, apologies for that. Hopefully, we get Lisa back just shortly. Is that it? Is it? Ah, yeah, it's pouring rain here in Brisbane. Yeah, thank you, Susan. Yeah, definitely helps. I'm currently in Sydney at the moment as well, and it's looking like it's potentially going to do the same thing here. And it was drizzly in Melbourne when I left Melbourne, so I think it's running up the East Coast. I was literally about to default to my lovely colleague Alison and go, Alison, what can we do right now? And she's already posted a message to me saying, tell everyone about our conference. Because we have a conference coming up as well. So I will stick that in the chat while we're waiting. And yeah, absolutely. Pace the Dan Siegel. So let me also just put a link in the chat for that as well. There's actually some really great resources. So it's play, acceptance, and curiosity and empathy. So how are we bringing all of that into what we do with our children and young people? So I'll post that in there because I've just Googled this and just found this really quickly, and it looks like a great
Hello,
little
I think I'm
resource.
back.
Hey, I was trying
I'm
to
so
fill time.
sorry. We
That's
just
all
keep
right.
drop we keep losing internet here at your town, and I can hear a storm raging outside, so I can only put it down to that. But I'm just going to go to the slide we were up to and
Oh,
just jump
good.
straight back in.
Perfect. I was just trying to fill some time there where somebody asked about the PACE model. There you go.
All right, let's see. Okay. All right, so yeah, those young people are going to get those new strategies and perspectives. And along the way, when they're engaging with those people that are providing support, they're strengthening the relationships and connections with those people, which is only going to improve their mental health and well-being moving forward. So when you're in a school situation, and I'm going to try and be aware that we've both got maybe people from a primary school setting and a high school setting here. So I just wanted to touch quickly on what you might see or hear when a young person might be showing that they're reaching out for help. And obviously this is going to be very different depending on every young person and what their background is. But in terms of, academic pressure and concerns, it might be to do with like, confidence and doubts. What if I mess up? What if I don't know what to do? You might see avoidance, perfectionism, like negative self-talk. If it's to do with family and home things, some clues might be something such as there's a lot going on, I didn't get much sleep. If it's to do with friendship and peer conflicts, you might see or hear things like social withdrawal, school avoidance. It could even be, those conflict cycles where friends are good and then they're not good and then they're back on again. So there's always going to be different clues depending on the situation, but also being aware that some young people won't give you much. They're not going to give you any clues at all. So sometimes the young people that are willing to show us and express these types of like cues and be more visible with what they need for their help seeking, can be the easiest to help and support because they have that ability to connect. Sometimes it's those young people that and it's possibly that trauma-informed approach coming in that they're not going to feel confident to, in fact, show that they're feeling willing to ask for help or that they need help. And so they're often the young people that we need to keep in the back of their mind, in the back of our minds. Sorry, why am I going backwards? Gosh. Love it. So sorry, team. So yeah, keeping that trauma informed in mind, and knowing that they're not always going to be willing to open up. So as part of trying to find out more about help seeking and building on what Chris said about the barriers, we've reached out to, here at Your Town, we have a youth network. So it's a group of young people aged 15 to 25 who meet every month to talk about, what's happening with young people, advocacy opportunities and things like that. So we reached out to those young people to ask them what were some of the barriers to them. They're either still at school or while they were at school, what were some of those barriers? So I just want to share some of those, some of the feedback that we got from them. And I think you're really going to see in relation to what Chris has already spoken about, that it's really aligning with some of those barriers that Chris has already mentioned. So maybe it's to do with them feeling like staff are not doing the right thing. So from their perspective, they may be feeling like something hasn't been followed through or in a way that they think it should be. Maybe it's that the space didn't feel private. So you'll see a trend coming through here that there are concerns about like privacy and other people and stigma about them needing help. Sometimes it's that they don't feel like their concerns are taken seriously, and that maybe they feel like there's been a breach of trust when something that they disclosed was then passed on to their parents when they would have preferred that that didn't happen. Sometimes that they think like maybe the support that they've received is not genuine. This young person has described it as just, tokenism. The action was tokenism and just felt like the adult that they confided in was just going through the process, but not really there for them on that sort of connected level. And maybe that relational trust wasn't there. So dealing with school refusal, so like a different situation, like, hey, I was a really good academic student, and I've never asked for any support, but actually when I needed it, my school wasn't there. So there's some jaded feelings sort of about, well, you didn't help me now, so why would I come to you sort of for help again? There's that, my teacher didn't believe me when I let them know about it. So that lack of trust with being like understood and believed, that feeling like a burden, being nervous about what parents are going to think and what the consequences of that might be. What we've actually seen as a, I guess, unintended consequence of the social media delay is this consequence of young people now being hesitant to disclose to a trusted adult that they've maybe seen something unsafe online or something worrying or concerning has happened online because they're not supposed to be on social media in the first place. So sometimes we find our young people are hesitant to ask for help because a well-intended adult who thinks they're protecting that person, their automatic response might be like, right, I'm taking that device away. And they think that they're keeping their young person safe and doing the right thing, but the young person just sees it as a consequence. And then it can become a barrier to help seeking. Confidentiality is coming through as a really big thing, having those opportunities to confide in a way that's not as maybe obvious. So those like email options and opportunities to not maybe physically have to walk through a door. I'm just going to speed through here because I'm aware that we've had lots of disruptions, culturally challenging as well. So I've just broken these down so we can break them down into personal barriers. So really that these are all what's happening within the student. So those internal worries about stigma, shame, believing they should just be able to cope with it on their own. Then we've got their social barriers. So this is maybe when they've like tried to seek help before and it hasn't gone so well. The person that has interacted with them in the past, that's maybe been a negative or they've maybe felt like it's been unresolved. So that's going to have an influence. Peer influence is a huge concern. Family attitudes as well. We see cultural norms and cultural norms can be a really big barrier for some of our young people coming from cultures where help seeking is not seen to be the thing to do. It's sort of seen to bring like shame on your family and seen as like embarrassing to sort of talk about your problems to other people. And then we've got our systemic barriers. So accessibility, we know like there's huge wait times in both the public and private systems to get, sort of a lot of mental health support. And we know our guidance officers, counsellors, school psychologists all have huge caseloads as well. And then we've got the financial cost and confidentiality concerns. That's really a big one for our young people, and we'll talk more about that as we go through. So really keeping that trauma-informed perspective when we think about those barriers as well is that help seeking for them can feel really risky instead of supportive. So we need to think about how we can flip that scenario for those young people and maybe, change our perspective of what we're thinking. So instead of thinking, oh, they're not asking for help, they're disengaged, or they don't want support, we've tried and they didn't want it. Let's stop to think about why, like Chris mentioned earlier, what's happened in their life before, what's happened to this point to get them to this space where they're not feeling like they want help or can ask for help. So, we often see a lot of these withdrawal signs of avoidance, disengagement, and they can be really misunderstood. Sometimes it's just poor behavior, a lack of interest in learning. And sometimes we need to stop and think that, hey, they actually might not be resistance to school and they might be actually early help seeking signs. And they're going to be displayed differently to a young person that perhaps doesn't have trauma and has that ability to say, oh, hey, like I've had a falling out with a friend, or this person's being mean to me, or, I'm really worried about something that's happening at home. So I want you to think about that second scenario that I gave with that young person who rocked up to school not feeling great, and that process that they were able to go through and to end up seeking that help. What happens if they don't follow that process? So what happens if they don't have those skills along the way and they don't have that, that relational trust with more than one adult that they can go to along the way? That's where we worry that we're going to end up with those young people that have those more complex issues and challenges to overcome because they've missed those early skills along the way that are really going to help them. So I guess what I'm going to move into now. So when students ask for help, how do we build a culture where they feel confident to do that in the first place? And I think what I want to acknowledge here is that I think as teachers, educators, wellbeing staff, whoever you are that's joining us today, if you're from a school environment or if you work with young people, I think it's likely you're here, you're already doing amazing things in your schools and with your young people. I think we ask a lot of our schools and of our teachers, and it seems like everything seems to be a teacher's and a school's responsibility. So I just want to share some ideas with you today that would be easy to implement into your school environment if they're not there already. Maybe even just start some conversations, about some things that you can do, get you to reflect on what you may or may not already be doing in your school environments, and understand that every school is different. And what works for one school is not going to work for another, because the students at your school are all going to be different and learn differently. So I want you to keep that in mind as well. So I'm going to make suggestions about how we can support students in the help-seeking process through this process of help-seeking and break it down that way. So noticing those body signals, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can create routines and structures to teach our young people to do those check-ins with how they're feeling, how we can build that emotional intelligence and awareness. help them build some resilience and coping strategies, build up that toolbox of mental health skills, understand that they don't have to cope with problems alone, where and who they can go to for help, and what we can do to build up that trust and support along the way. So I'm going to give examples from both primary school and high school scenarios. So when we recognise that something doesn't feel right, so number one, so I just realised that there we go, recognising when something doesn't feel right in the primary school space. So this is really just routine visual stuff for our primary school kids. So it can be simple as morning check-in, circle time, how am I feeling today? It might be a little traffic light system. They just come in and move their peg up to a level as they come in to indicate like how they're feeling, what zone they think they're in. We see a lot of schools using like the zones of regulation, which is really amazing to teach young people like to tune into their body and think about what zone they're in and how they're feeling about learning for the day. Check-in boards are really good as well. Just really simple structure everyday things for our primary school students. In the high school, we're seeing that used more now through sort of digital check-ins. Some schools are sort of relying on apps and sort of online forms and wellbeing platforms and things like that now. Exit tickets, in your year level meetings that you have every day, once a week, just a little, post-it note on the way out with their name on it, maybe with a prompt. On your way out, I just want you to write down one word about how you're feeling today. Something I might need support with. They could even just stick it on a desk, like as they walk out, stick it on the wall. Those just regular check-ins. One of the things that our young people flagged with us is that making sure that the help seeking is not just there for the people that let it be known that they need it. So it's checking in with all the students and making sure they all know how to access help, that they're all getting that opportunity for a check-in. It could be journaling, self-reflection activities, just really teaching them to regularly tune into their bodies and thinking about how they're feeling, how they're managing, and how they're coping. And that's tied really closely with developing emotional literacy, because once they're checking in with themselves, then they're trying to tune into how they're feeling, and then they need the language to be able to express what it is that they're feeling. So it's teaching them that vocabulary of happy, frustrated, worried, disappointed, excitement. Again, it might be using those visual supports, really like using daily language in class, like really modeling to the students, oh, I can see that, you're feeling this today. Why do you think that might be? What zone are you in? And really starting to, for our primary school students, talk about body clues. And what clues are our bodies giving us that we might not be feeling our best selves today. So through our Kids Helpline School program, we use emotion wheels to help talk about different emotions that young people might be feeling and help build those vocabularies. And that's something that you can definitely use within your classrooms. So we want to talk that emotions are normal and they're not always going to feel comfortable. Sometimes they're going to feel really yucky and not nice. And we want to start talking about what signals our body might be showing us that we're maybe not doing okay. Developing an emotional literacy in high school, that's going to be expanding that vocabulary. So for example, this is our wheel that we would use with our high school students. So we're really giving them that ability to communicate like those more complex issues and challenges that they might be navigating. Again, reflective prompts are really great. Class discussions about more complex issues like stress, identity, relationships, pressure. Normalizing that it's okay to feel more than one thing at once. It's okay to be like confused and excited or worried. And yeah, different things at the same time. And we start to explore the link between like thoughts and feelings and behavior. So for example, instead of saying, oh, I did really bad on that test, I suck at maths. I'm never going to be good at maths. We start trying to give them positive reframing to say, oh, that test didn't go so good, but I really want to do better. What could I do to do better next time? So we're really working on that positive reframing. We also start talking in secondary school about our frontal lobe and what's happening to our body when we have those big emotions. So, talking to them about that window of tolerance and that, what's that ideal window for them to be able to learn and function and be reasonable and make good choices, and that they're going to struggle to do that when that frontal lobe switches off, when they're under stress and they're not coping. And then that leads into the coping skills of what we can do to switch that frontal lobe back on to help self-regulate. So building resilience and coping tools. This is really important. So we really, really need to help our young people understand, first of all, what resilience is and why it's important, and what strategies they can use to help regulate their emotions as well. It's really important that we give our young people time to practice doing this when they are, maybe in that green zone of regulation, or where they're in that window of tolerance, where they can practice in a calm space. And going back to what Chris said about co-regulation, co-regulating and helping to do it with them when they're not in that space where they can do it on their own yet. So really working on those calm down regulation strategies, movement and sensory breaks, working on those problem solving skills like, I can really see you've got a problem. What could we do to fix that? What are the steps that we could follow? Role play and modeling works really well in this age group. And that positive self-talk and perseverance, especially in relation to resilience. I can do this, like I've got this. And we talk a lot through Kids Helpline of like, using the word yet, the power of yet. I can't do this yet, in relation to resilience. So yeah, resilience is used in lots of different ways. They're going to navigate lots of different problems, and resilience and those emotional coping skills can be there for them. We talk through Kids Helpline at school about the 4 Ps of resilience: positivity, perspective, problem solving, and persevering. And we're going to give them some strategies that they can use to help them when they're, out of that zone. What can they do to bring themselves back into the green zone? So they really need help to practice and learn those strategies. And not every strategy is going to work for every student. So it's really important to give them lots of different strategies to try, so they can find the one that works best for them. In the high school space, it's really going to move into more like helping them with like stress management and protective habits. How can they set up their daily routines and structures to really help keep their life in balance, and stop everything feeling really overwhelming, that time management and organisation. Those cognitive strategies that I mentioned before, just challenging that negative thinking, considering perspective. And we talk a lot with Kids Helpline at school about that active versus passive coping skills. And that's really important for the adolescents in particular, to understand that we try and actively cope with our problems and not sort of take that passive approach of sort of burying our head in the sand and hoping that, everything will just feel better all on its own. So getting them to think about, what's draining my bucket, what's really making me feel stressed, and what can I put back in my bucket to fill it back up again, and make myself feel well and positive. We, through Kids Helpline, have a wellbeing app called Quibble, where young people can go on and track how they're feeling. Quibble is that wobbly feeling you get when you're not quite feeling yourself. And it's really great even if young people aren't using it all the time. What Cribble will do is give them some wellbeing strategies that they can try and work into their everyday life to help them feel good. So it's just really great for giving them suggestions and ideas of building up those wellbeing tools, and they can find those wellbeing tools that work best for them. My Circle is another service we have, which is for peer support. So it's a great space for young people to go on and talk to other young people that might be feeling, experiencing similar challenges. It's a really safe space. It's moderated by our Kids Helpline counsellors, and it's a great soft entry into help seeking. They might not feel ready, to talk to an adult. They might not feel okay talking to a friend because they might not want their friend to know about it. So they might be able to reach out to some peers through My Circle. And then it's like understanding that they need to not cope with problems alone. So this one is a really important part of the process. So in primary schools, it's lots of visible displays and signs about where young people can go. So help maps in classrooms, pictures and photos of who's the guidance officer, who's on the wellbeing team, who are the people that I can go to at school to talk to if I have a problem. If my classroom teacher is not available, who else in the school can I go to talk to, and where are the spaces that I can go? So where are the spaces that I can go to talk to somebody, and where are the spaces that I can go to maybe like calm down, chill out, use some of my wellbeing strategies if I need to as well. Getting them to identify with the 5 fingers of support, who are 5 trusted people that they can talk to, 5 trusted adults. And we try and talk to our young people about identifying people within the school environment, but also out of the school environment as well, because those trusted adults at school might not always be available. And I think what's really important is starting to teach them the vocabulary and giving them some really simple scripts, for asking for help. So like, what would you say if, or can I talk to you about some sentence starters? Because sometimes for our young people, one of the biggest hurdles is knowing what to say. So giving them some scripts and having the chance to practice that too. So I'm just going to skip through some of these slides because I'm just aware of time. In the high school space, it's being aware of having multiple options available for help seeking. And the young people knowing what those options are, with some of them being face-to-face and some of them being like online or definitely anonymous or confidential. That's really important to high school students, and giving them some control of the situation. So instead of just saying, oh, go and talk to the counsellor, changing that dialogue. Well, what would you like to happen? Who do you feel comfortable talking to? What would you like the outcome of this to be? Giving them some scope. So when we spoke to our youth network, we asked them for some feedback about what was important to them in terms of help seeking in schools. And approachable staff was there as the highest actually. So 73.3% of our young people said that having approachable staff was extremely important to them, and the rest of them said it was very important. So they all identified that. So everyone in the whole school needs to know who those people are and have multiple trusted adults that they can go to within the school environment. Having a confidential space was really important. Anonymous ways to ask for help, and clear information about where to get help. So I think sometimes, we give that information to the students in year 7 when they first start, or maybe there's a quick reminder at the start of the year, and then it's easy to kind of get into the school year, and maybe we know that the students that are possibly accessing that support all the time know where to go, but does everyone in the whole school know where to go and who to go to, and how can we keep that visible, and how can we keep that consistent? And, starting in the high school space to think who can they go to in that outer circle of support. So who's maybe in their inner circle, who's in that outer circle of support that they can turn to, and those outside organisations that they might be able to talk to as well. So Kids Helpline is always there 24/7. So I think when we move through this process of helping our students build this process of help seeking, if we're able to support them at each stage of this process, I think naturally what's happening as part of that process is we're building trust and connection the whole way along that continuum, because every time we're giving them scope to check in with their body, to communicate how they're feeling, to have the opportunity to learn and use some coping strategies and resilience, to have a really clear idea of where they can go for help within the school environment and outside of school environment. All of those conversations that are taking place are building that relational trust. And you're showing them through all of those conversations and all of those learning experiences that mental health matters, that you care about their well-being, that talking about emotions and well-being is normal, and they're going to be much more likely to seek help and to feel comfortable talking to adults that are helping them with this process, because you're letting them know that you think it matters, and then they'll feel like they can talk to you about it. And then if they do come and talk to you about it and it's successful, if they face a challenge again, then the process can start again, and they'll feel more likely to follow that process again in the future because that trust has been built up. A couple of other things to mention in relation to building trust. I think creating those positive first experiences is really important. Making students feel heard and seen and validated is really, really important to young people. Being consistent and following through. So if a young person comes to you with a problem, no one expects you to have their answers straight away, and it's okay if you don't. And to say to that young person, hey, I'm going to go and find out, or I'm going to go and talk to somebody else, and I'm going to come back to you. And then following through and making sure that you check back in with that person and follow up with them and find out for them that issue has been resolved. And just ensuring that staff know, what those pathways are and referral pathways are too, so that the student can feel supported. And I think listening to student voice is really important. So we found, I won't go through it all now, but we found when we asked our young people, we got some really great responses about what schools can do, what they thought their schools were doing well, and what schools could do better to improve help seeking. So ask your students, ask them what they think about help seeking at your school, ask them what they know about help seeking, ask them how they feel about it, and then listen to the responses and take them on board. So I think that's the best place for you to start. This was some of the feedback that we got from our young people. So I'll just jump back to this point about confidentiality. I checked in with a few of our Kids Helpline counsellors because I think this is a big one, especially for our high school students. And I think it's really important for schools to be clear about confidentiality. So what does it mean? What does confidentiality look like? What does it sound like? When can we keep your information confidential? And when are we going to have to let somebody else know? And I think it's Kids Helpline counsellors some really great points from them, because obviously confidentiality is an issue that they have to navigate when young people call through to Kids Helpline. And we always have to be really clear around confidentiality, and that they have the same reporting obligations that educators and schools do. But what we want to do is try and come at it from the perspective of, it's really important to us that you feel safe and you have the right to be safe. And I'm not doing this to dob you in or to get you into trouble. I'm here to support you and to do this with you and to keep you safe and to involve them in the help seeking process as much as possible. And even say, I'm here to, I can sit with you, I can be on the phone with you when you tell your parents, or I can be there with you to help sort of keep that trust there as much as possible. Just visibility and transparency is really important. So yeah, listen to what your students have to say, support yourselves, because it's really hard to be there for our students if we are struggling ourselves. So keep your own mental health and wellbeing in mind. It's really important for you. And don't forget to include your parents and carers. It's really important that if we're giving all of these messages about help seeking to our young people, that we're including our parents and carers with that, so we can keep breaking down those barriers about help seeking and what it means for our young people. So Parent Line is a great resource that is there as well for your parents. Sometimes when our young people are struggling, their parents are struggling too, and sometimes just need some help and guidance with how to support their young people and how to communicate more effectively with their young people. So Parent Line is there for all parents. Bearing in mind, this is a Queensland and Northern Territory service. There is also My Circle for parents, which is very similar to our online for adolescents, My Circle, where they can talk to other parents about issues and challenges that their young people are facing. If you want any more information about Kids Helpline at school and what we do, we're a free wellbeing and education program. It's all about early intervention, this help supporting students through this help seeking process, and letting them know that Kids Helpline is there. Sorry, I apologise for the technology issues that we had along the way. I'm sorry I had to speed through some of that a little bit faster than I would have liked, but I just want to say thank you for the amazing work that you're doing in schools and with your young people. We appreciate you, and the work that you do is really important. I'll hand back over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Well, we might, if anyone wants to stay and ask a question, I think they are more than welcome to. But I'm conscious that we've gone a wee bit over thanks to the weather. We'll blame the storms in not so sunny Queensland. Lisa, thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful information and all these amazing resources. I think Emma said it beautifully in the chat there as well. Kids Helpline Schools is an amazing resource. So many really, really concrete tools and strategies that we can implement there, including, Quibble and Circle as well. And, some of the other free resources you have on the website are just absolutely fantastic. So I would really encourage everyone to check out those links. If anyone has a question, please feel free to pop it in the chat. Lisa and I can hover around for a minute and try and answer it. Otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for giving us some of your time. Lisa, thank you so much for your time and sharing all of these resources. And is there any kind of last thoughts, points you want to make, Lisa?
No, I don't think so. I think let's just keep, working together to, help our young people in this space and keep breaking down, those barriers and stigma around mental health and trauma-informed, education and teaching as well.
Wonderful. Well, Lisa, thank you so much again for your time and your wisdom. For everyone listening, thank you for your time as well and your engagement. And for anyone who wasn't able to get here live, we'll also send you out this recording. And so thank you for watching the recording as well. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Stay well, stay safe, stay out of the rain. And thank you. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone. Thanks,
everyone.
Chris. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.